Estava à toa na vida, o meu amor me chamou pra ver a banda passar, cantando coisas de amor. A minha gente sofrida despediu-se da dor pra ver a banda passar, cantando coisas.
The goal of this video is to be a very quick rundown of what we feel are the 11 biggest differences that a native English speaker needs to know when they're trying to learn Portuguese after having learned Spanish. And so we each have our own backgrounds with some exposure to each of them. I studied Spanish for 8 years in high school and college, and then for the last 4 years have been learning and speaking Portuguese both here in the United States and in Brazil.
I'm Citali, and I've been here in the US for almost 3 years, and I've been exposed to Portuguese because my boyfriend is from Brazil, but before that I never ever spoke Portuguese, and it's been really fun to learn.
Yeah, so I'm Glauber, I'm from Brazil. I was born and raised in south of Brazil, right near Uruguay, and the city called Bagé. And the last 4 years I've been living in São Paulo. Before, of course, I came to the United States. That I'm here. I've been here for 6 months, I think.
So, tip 1. We introduced 5 new letters in Portuguese that we don't have in Spanish, and these are A with a tilde, O with a tilde, E with a circumflex, O with a circumflex, and C with a cedilla or cedilha, right? Cedilha.
Yep.
In Portuguese. And some quick examples of how these are pronounced, and then we'll go more into specifics, but this is just so that you recognize these letters when you see them.
L.
Lana.
Televisões.
Televisiones.
Por quê?
¿Por qué?
Colônia.
Colonia.
Açúcar.
Azúcar.
And so for the A and the O, these are going to be more nasal vowels, and we'll get to that in a little bit. E and O, as you could hear in porque and colonia, right, are more open vowels than we have in Spanish. And then the C cedilla is cedilha.
Yep.
Cedilha.
Very good.
Is like an S sound, essentially. Tip number 2, final position E and O. If you see an E or an O at the end of the word, in Brazilian Portuguese, you'll typically hear these pronounced as E and U. And some examples.
Telefone.
Teléfono.
Nome.
Nombre.
Livro.
Libro.
Como.
Como.
So again, the E and the U that you really hear when speaking with a Brazilian, instead of an E or an O, which is expected in Spanish. Tip 3, we're going to get into our nasalized vowels, which for me have been one of the most difficult things about learning pronunciation in Portuguese, is this nasal sound. It's almost as if you are plugging your nose and saying or on. Glauber can do it perfectly. He says that I have issues with letters, right? So, for example, really try to hear the nasal sound that Glauber has that is non-existent in the same words in Spanish when Zitelli says them.
Não. Coração. Irmã.
No. Corazón. Hermana.
Não. Coração. Irmã.
And then for a nasal O.
Corações. Lições.
Corazones. Lecciones.
Corações. Lições.
And so instead of it being perhaps a corações, you really need to work on that like corações. Tip number 4, also dealing with nasalized vowels, but instead of being signaled by the tilde over the A or the O, you'll find nasalized vowels before an M or an N, final M or an N in a word or consonant.
Tem, sim, som, hotel.
Tiene, sí, sonido, un hotel.
Tem, sim, som, hotel.
And then here are some N examples of nasal vowels, where you lose the N but keep this nasal vowel sound.
Quanto, convento, sinto, fonte, assunto, muito.
Cuánto, convento, ciento, fuente, asunto, mucho.
Quanto, convento, cinto, fonte, assunto, muito.
And clearly muito doesn't have an N in it. And why you said this is a
That's
exception?
Because majority of people in Brazil pronounce muito.
As almost as if it had an N.
Yeah, and then the sound is almost as
Right. Okay. Tip number 5, and this is a little bit of a difficult one to explain, but with the letters G, D, and T, when you find them before a final E or any I, you pronounce them soft. So, for example, the word for city in Portuguese is cidade. That's a D-E at the end, not cidade, which is more continental Portuguese or Portuguese from Portugal. So that's a soft D, G, cidade.
Yeah, one thing that you can pronounce cidade is not wrong, right? It's the right way, but normally people say cidade. I don't know why.
Yeah,
but
that's typically
how the
what
things
you'll
are.
encounter.
Yeah.
And I will mention, well, I guess we'll start out with the G, the soft G, before an E or an I. And this is a rule that applies always.
Gente, longe, gigante, giz.
Gente, lejos, gigante, giz.
Gente, longe, gigante, giz.
And for D and T, they're the same as G, with one exception. If the DE or the TE is within the word and not at the end of the word, then it's still pronounced hard. So for example, the word for 10 in Portuguese is 10 and not jizz or something like that.
Yep.
So we'll go with D here.
Cidade, pode, 10, dia, dizer.
Ciudad, puede, 10, día, decir.
Cidade, pode, 10, dia, dizer.
And so you can see that the hard D absolutely isn't absent in Portuguese, but rather you need to be ready for the soft D at the end. Especially you'll see many DE, TE, GE words. And then for T, and the same rule applies for D. If the TE is within the word, it's pronounced a hard T, but at the end it'll be ch, chi, or ch.
7, diamante, tempo, tio, tipo.
7, diamante, tiempo, tío, tipo.
7, diamante, tempo, tio, tipo.
Number 6, and this is one of my favorites, and it's very counterintuitive for an English and Spanish speaker, that an R could be pronounced like an H or a H in a word. So if you find an R at the beginning of a word or at the beginning of a syllable immediately following a consonant within a word, it's pronounced H. And also a double R is pronounced always H. And so some examples for a single R.
R, regra, honra, Israel, Rio de Janeiro.
Rana, regla, honra, Israel, Rio de Janeiro.
R, regra, honra, Israel, Rio de Janeiro.
And I kind of find this funny that both Spanish and English speakers are actually saying Rio de Janeiro completely wrong. I kind of sound like a hick when I'm saying Rio de Janeiro, because it's really pronounced Rio. What is it? Rio de Janeiro. Right?
Rio, yeah.
Rio. Rio.
Yeah, we don't have long O's or long A's.
Right. Yeah, so you have both the R as the H and the O as the U, and the DE is soft G. And so the whole word just kind of sounds completely different, right?
Yeah.
I can you say Rio de
Janeiro.
Janeiro?
I had this problem here. I was trying to say some word and I don't remember the word now, but I remember the situation.
And so you're saying remember. Remember.
Remember. Yeah. I know that's remember, but
yeah.
It's automatic. That's what I'm saying. We start speaking like in Portuguese, right? Because the R in the beginning, right?
Right.
But it's remember. Okay.
Double R.
Okay. Carro, cachorro.
Carro, cachorro.
Carro, cachorro.
Tip number 7, L at the end of a word or a syllable. I like this one a lot too. It's very much like the W sound we have in English. So, o, ow, ew. And this doesn't exist in Spanish, I would say, at the end of the word. You're still, if you're pronouncing, for example, mal, you're going to have that definite L sound. Whereas in Portuguese, you're going to hear that ow that Glauber will say. And I have examples in A, E, I, O, and U here.
Mal, falta, legal, animal.
Mal, falta, legal, animal.
Mal, falta, legal, animal.
E,
Papel, túnel.
Papel, túnel.
Papel, túnel.
I,
Mil, barril, Brasil.
Mil, barril, Brasil.
Mil, barril, Brasil.
O,
Sol, espanhol, gol.
Sol, español, gol.
Sol, espanhol, gol.
U,
Azul, última, multicultural.
Azul, último, multicultural.
Azul, última, multicultural.
and I really like that last example with multicultural in Portuguese versus
Multicultural.
very much more staccato in Spanish, and with the L sound instead of the W. So just something to keep in mind. Tip number 8 is the sound of LH and NH together. So LH will have the sound in English as million, the y, and NH as in onion, the ny, and very much like the ny sound in Spanish. And some examples for LH.
Julho, mulher, trabalhar, lhe.
Julio, mujer, trabajar, le.
Julho, mulher, trabalhar, lhe.
And for NH, or the ny sound.
Banho, senhor, amanhã, tenho, vinho.
Baño, señor, mañana, tengo, vino.
Banho, senhor, amanhã, tenho, vinho.
Tip number 9, the letter J will always be pronounced as the J in treasure. J.
Já, J, traje, laranja.
Ya, J, traje, naranja.
Já, J, traje, laranja.
And that's a little closer to English, I think. So an English speaker will be more comfortable with this one, the J sound, as opposed to the H, that you'll have the H more so in Spanish. Tip number 10, we've already seen a couple of these in past examples, but the CH together will be a soft sound always. So sh, like in show, the sh in show, and this always applies.
China, cheque, chegar, marchar.
China, cheque, llegar, marchar.
China, cheque, chegar, marchar.
And finally, number 11 is a pretty easy one. The V just stays a V in Portuguese. Us learners of Spanish know that the V will often have a B sound in many Spanish-speaking countries that you have to remember. And I remember thinking that was so strange that a V could have a B sound, in the same way that I think it's really strange that an R could have an H sound in Portuguese. But in Portuguese, you can just keep the V as it is.
Vez, viajar, lavar, palavra.
Ves, viajar, lavar, palabra.
Vez, viajar, lavar, palavra.
All right, so that should wrap it up. I hope that this was a helpful introduction to pronunciation in Portuguese versus Spanish for an English speaker. And stay tuned because we may be posting fairly soon lessons about grammar differences, top 10 or top 15 grammar differences for a learner, and then also vocabulary differences or false cognates, things like that. So until next time, see you later.
Até logo, pessoal.
Hasta pronto.